We want to move on to another big story this week, which I guess now is the end of the government shutdown, the federal government shutdown that wreaked so much havoc on so many people, especially those who need food assistance from SNAP. And a lot of conversation about the Democrats and what they didn't do and their role in facilitating the reopening of the government and how we got here, and just the venality of the Republicans as well and the policies they shut the government down over, which is stripping people from healthcare and sending people to starve. Nonetheless, before I editorialize too much, let's bring in our guest here on the show. We are very, very honored to be joined for this segment by Nathan Robinson, who is the editor-in-chief of Current Affairs and the co-author, along with Noam Chomsky, of The Myth of American Idealism: How U.S. Foreign Policy Endangers the World. Nathan, thanks so much for joining us on the show.
Hey, Eugene. Hey, Rania. Nice to see you.
Well, great to have you with us. And I mean, there's obviously so many threads we could pick up on here. I mean, one thing I
Yeah.
was thinking about this morning is, there's so much focus obviously on the 8 Democrats who capitulated, who gave Trump this win. But to me, it just feels just notable. Like, not that long before the shutdown, you had the mayor of Chicago say, let's have a general strike in this country to push back. The government shuts down. The Democrats say this is horrible. And then they just kind of say it's horrible and sort of sit on their hands. So it seems to me like even when you look at the 8 people are obviously terrible, but then I think about all these other people in Congress and the Senate and the governors not calling for mass mobilization, all these different pieces. It just sort of
Mhm.
felt like uh, I don't even know what to say. Like, just all up and down the line, a very limp opposition to what was obviously a terrible move by the Republicans to gut healthcare and other forms of social assistance. But anyway, I am editorializing now, but some of your thoughts, maybe perhaps now that the government has technically reopened.
The tragedy of it is that during the shutdown, these Democrats who had been so weak and had been disappointing so many people and had really been out of touch with the popular anger at the Trump administration, which, I mean, we saw in the big No Kings protest. There's a lot of rage and a lot of demand for Democrats to take the kind of militant stance that you're talking about. Well, the shutdown had actually been quite encouraging because there they were holding the line. There they were with a concrete demand, which was a material demand that actually would have helped people, right, to continue the Obamacare subsidies. And they weren't giving in. And people saw that they weren't giving in, and they, in fact, voted for Democrats overwhelmingly in the elections that we just had. So what was going on, was something pretty encouraging, which was Democrats understanding that their base wanted to see them hold firm against the Trump administration's worst policies. And so that's why, it ending the way it did is just so pathetic and typical and feels like such a return to form. And obviously a lot of the blame, I wrote this big article about Chuck Schumer, who I think really disgraced himself in this, where, he managed to not be among the 8, but still very clearly be unable to control, or unwilling to control his caucus and lead them during this moment where they had been, the polls show that this was what people wanted to see.
Nathan, with that in mind, I am wondering, like, do you think we're witnessing a failed negotiation here? Or was this maybe performative from the start? Like, did Democratic leaders ever intend to actually fight for healthcare protections? Or, the more cynical side of me, and I think this is true, was this more about managing public perception? Because to what Eugene was saying,
Yeah.
there was so much antagonism and disdain for the Republicans refusing to extend healthcare subsidies. And I think that goes, a lot of that across the board, except for like the diehard MAGA people. And the Democrats were actually in quite a good position here. The recent election showed that. And they just threw that away. By handing this over with literally zero. They got
Yeah.
nothing out of
Nothing.
this. Like, people are gonna hurt after hurting from this shutdown. We're all gonna hurt, actually. All of our healthcare premiums are gonna go up. So they could have
Yeah.
mobilized people, but they didn't. So did they ever actually mean to win anything here?
Well, I mean, motives may differ among Democrats. So there may be members of the caucus who were very serious, and there may be others who went along just for the, as you say, for the sake of maintaining public appearances, knowing that there was an angry popular demand. I think what is true is that there was no unified strategy or vision of how this was going to go, as as I understand it, what this was sort of inevitably moving towards was a point at which Republicans who were never going to give in on the Obamacare issue were going to probably abolish the filibuster. That's what I understand. And I think there are enough Democrats who didn't want to force that kind of showdown that this was always going to end the way it did. And so, yes, you're right that from the start, it is the case that there was not a unified party strategy that said we are willing to ride this out to the end, even though riding it out to the end would ultimately have showed the Republicans to be willing to take radical steps, including abolishing the filibuster, in order to ensure that people didn't get affordable health care. And, as this went on, they were really exposing that Republicans would rather starve the poor than give people affordable health care. I mean, for them, that's almost a bonus. You get to starve the poor and you get to deprive people of affordable health care. But I think it's very clear from the start that Democrats were not committed to a real showdown here and weren't willing to accept the stakes of that showdown.
I think that's a really good point. And I mean, I think it also speaks to sort of how, a lot of these political issues have been framed and how a certain segment of the Democrats for sure, want to frame them in terms of what's popular and what's not. But I think that the point you just made is one a lot of people were speaking to, is that it not only would reveal Republicans, but it's such an extreme agenda. I mean, forget just the ACA. I mean, universal health care is very popular in this country. Obviously, many of the other policies are very popular. Certainly, taking $1 trillion away from Medicaid, ACA, and SNAP in order to give $1 trillion to the richest people and tax cuts is like not popular. And it feels like there's also this thing that's sort of nested in the conversation within the Democratic Party that, the sort of broadly popular policies, which, are certainly embodied by a lot of politicians, the Bernie Sanders of the world and people like that, that somehow they aren't popular. And somehow we have to maintain a certain level of centrism, and like pushing hard on these things is somehow going to hurt us, not help us.
I think something really important in what you're saying there, Eugene, is that, for all that I appreciate that the demand in this shutdown was something, as I say, something material, right? Protecting people's healthcare subsidies. It's protecting what already exists, the disappointing status quo. And I think what's very clear is that even though you had a certain number of the Senate Democrats who were willing to force a showdown over protecting the status quo was very bad. Right? Obamacare doesn't work for a lot. It's already incredibly expensive for a lot of people. The Affordable Care Act didn't work. Healthcare is not affordable. If it had worked, healthcare would be affordable, and it isn't. So it didn't work. It was a failure. And there is a total lack, right? There is some willingness to fight to some degree to protect the little crumbs that we have from the Republican effort to just totally dismantle the social welfare programs. But there is almost no effort, as you say, to provide an alternative vision for something better. And this is what Bernie's saying all the time. He's saying, there's no acknowledgement among Democrats that there is something fundamentally broken about the healthcare system.
It's also this like weird obsession with like wanting the right to like them. I mean, there's a lot happening here. There's also like, what's the Democratic Party, right? It's like a corporation that's funded by health insurance industry, pharmaceutical industry. I don't think that the centrist leadership of that party, the so-called moderates, even though there's nothing moderate about them. I think that they are inclined to do the bidding of their donors, not the bidding of the base that supports this party. But also at the end of the day, we've seen extreme cowardice in the face of a really scary administration. Like, Trump is consolidating power. He literally says the Democratic Party is a terrorist organization. He makes no distinction between like people like us and the centrists of the Democratic Party. Like, right. His Justice Department is being weaponized to go after everybody left of MAGA, which includes the vast majority of the country. But like, what do you get? You get the sort of like, what you get is a win for the people like James Carville, the sort of consultant class that are like, yeah, roll over and play dead. It's like there's a massive
You're quoting
assault.
him directly, by the way.
Yeah, that's literally what he said, is the Democrats should roll over and play dead. And that is what the core of the party leadership has decided to do, which is why amidst this horrific attack from every angle on us. Like, it just every day is like some new war on the people of this country from this administration. It seems like there's zero protection from the party in opposition. They're kind of silent or non-existent. So it's like the shutdown was, for the first time, them seemingly doing something. And even then, they just threw it down the toilet. I know I'm commenting more than asking a question, but please, your thoughts.
Yeah. Well, Rania, you're being a little unfair to Chuck Schumer, because he famously said that when Trump was trying to extort universities into giving the government giant piles of money and restricting campus free speech, he said he was writing a very strong letter to the Trump administration demanding an explanation. I mean, that's his words. If you watch him in these press conferences, I mean, he has absolutely no ability to inspire anyone, absolutely no leadership skills. And what's very strange is it seems as if that's what Senate Democrats want. Like, we have to conclude that they don't want someone who is an effective and capable leader. I believe Chuck Schumer came in 2017 as the Senate Democrat leader. And since then, he has become totally unpopular with the American people, right? His approval rating is, I think, minus 33. Whereas like Bernie Sanders has like a +7 favorability among the American people. So, I mean, if you cared at all about having a fighting party that actually was an effective opposition, and you realized that the American people despised the guy you had as leader, that they found him totally uninspiring, that most people didn't even know who he was, and if they did know who he was, they didn't like him. I mean, you would get rid of him yesterday. They've kept him since 2017. And at a certain point, you have to conclude that they want to fail, or at least, as you say, that they are more committed to doing donors' bidding than to actually achieving anything.
Well, I have a third conspiracy, and that is that they are all undercover Republicans. Hey, you don't know, it could be possible. That'd be brilliant, right? Like, if the Republicans just had like undercover agents running the Democratic Party.
Well, but you're right in a certain sense. I mean, that's just true in a certain sense, in that, I mean, it's like AOC said, you know, in a different country, she and Joe Biden wouldn't be in the same party, right? Because we don't have a left party in this country. Democrats generally are fairly conservative, and they're not that far from, they have historically not been that far between the two parties. There hasn't been that much distance on a lot of issues. I mean, even Obamacare, right, is a market-based policy. There's almost no constituency within
it's Romney care.
Yeah, right. It's Romney care, right? I mean, it's a bipartisan initiative. Of course, Republicans have gone so far to the right that it obscures the fact that you're talking about, which is that Democrats could, in a sense, have been moderate Republicans in like 1996.
Good point. The Republican healthcare plan now is like the feudal healthcare plan. Just bring back leeches in the time before there is any vaccine.
Yeah.
Real quick before we let you go, Nathan, you mentioned the article you wrote. Where can people follow Current Affairs?
Yeah, if they go to currentaffairs.org, or they follow us on Twitter /X at CUR Affairs. We're also on Instagram, Current Affairs Magazine. We have a beautiful print edition that people can subscribe to. Yeah.
Fantastic. Well, as always, appreciate you. Well, not as always, first time on the show. Great to have you here on the show.
Yeah, so nice to finally get to talk to y'all.
Absolutely. Take care, Nathan.